So now you know how to confidently structure your business for growth. You know how to reclaim your most valuable asset, your time, how to become more productive, how to get focused in on completing the highest value tasks in your business. Let's move on now and let's look at how you really ramp up the profit that the business produces. Now, this is one heck of a clever guy. And whenever a clever guy or a clever girl says something profound like Einstein's saying here, I believe we would all do well to sit up and take notice. So as you can see, what he's talking about is the compound effect, which is effectively earning interest on interest. And when you take this principle and you apply it into the way your business operates, you can get some really quick and often huge wins. Better still, the more you use it and the longer you use it, the bigger those wins become. So let me show you how this works for me, how it works for my clients, and how it can work for you too. To help you along, by the way, you'll find a blank Y factor profit model on page, I think it's 11 of your handout. Now, in business, there's lots of things that we as business owners would like to have more control over. Three of those things are the number of customers. In actual fact, I believe we don't want customers, we want ideal customers, people we enjoy working with. I'll talk a little bit more about ideal customers later. Now, I'm guessing, but I do believe that most people on this workshop would like more ideal customers as well. And the reason you want more ideal customers is so that you can generate more sales. The challenge with those two numbers, the number of customers and the number of sales, is they can be very ego-led. Ego-led. Because you can have a huge amount of customers, you can have more than enough sales, you can have millions of pounds in sales, but it doesn't mean doodly if you've got no profit dropping to the bottom line. A really great question to ask yourself is, do you want to get big or do you want to get wealthy? Do you want to get big or do you want to get wealthy? Because they don't necessarily go hand in hand. So we've got ideal customers, we've got sales, and we've got profit. And those are three things that we would like more direct control over. The challenge is we can't control those numbers. Those numbers are what are known as lagging indicators. They're the result of something that happened back there. They happened in the past. No, they're the results of activities and actions that were taken in the past. The other thing about those three numbers is they are in no way, shape, or form a good predictor of the future. What we have got an element of control over, though, is the leading indicators, those activities and actions that drive those three outcomes. So to get customers, we need to generate some inquiries through our marketing. Some of those inquiries will buy, some won't, and that determines your conversion rate. So the better the sales process, the better the conversion rate is going to be. And then if you take your sales and you divide it by the number of invoices, that's going to give you an average spend. I'll talk more about average spend shortly. So that there is one arm of customer acquisition. The other arm is repeat customers, people who've already bought from you. Now, you would expect your conversion rate to repeat customers to be different, probably better than people who haven't bought from you. Because these people have already had a good experience when they've bought from you in the past, so they already know, like, and trust you. And the average spend is likely to be different as well. Let me think of an example. Imagine you've got a landscape gardening company. The initial purchase, the landscape garden, that can be a sizable chunk of money. But subsequent purchases could be things like furniture, it could be lawn maintenance, it could be plants, all at a much lower ticket price. And that can happen in reverse as well, where they start off on a low ticket price and move on to a higher ticket price. If you multiply all those six numbers out, what you get is your sales. When you make a sale, a percentage of every sale goes towards variable costs or cost of sales, things like wages, materials, transport. Now, for those of you who have got a service business, you might be saying, I don't have a cost of sale. I've had plenty of people in the service business tell me they don't have cost of sale. You do have a cost of sale. It'll be tied up in time and people. And if you're not allowing for that in your pricing, then the P&L, or the information the P&L is giving you is not the right information to run a business on. Now, the percentage of sale that's left over, multiply that out, that gives you your gross profit. And then we've got our overheads. So what happens is every time you make a sale, a portion of that sale drops into the overheads bucket to pay for overheads or fixed costs. At the point at which that bucket becomes full, all your fixed costs are paid, you now reach what's known as break even. And that's the point at which the business starts to make profit. So until you reach break even, you're basically working to pay the bills. Can you just put in a chat, just give us a thumbs up, who here tracks the break even? I'm not getting a lot of thumbs up. I've seen one person so far. That's not very good, is it? 1 out of 47. Now, if you don't track your break even, believe me, you are missing out on a huge profit changing opportunity. Now, when I work with clients, I want them to get more control over these 8 areas in blue. They can have more control over the controllable, so to speak. But now let's take this a little bit stage further. I want to put some numbers into this so you can see how it works. What I would encourage you to do, if you've got one with you, follow along on a calculator, if you've got one to hand. And you want you to do that because you can see there's going to be no smoke and mirrors. The model just works. So in this business, we're going to say that over the course of the year, they're generating 1,100 inquiries from their marketing efforts. And 30% of those inquiries become paying customers who on average are spending £1,200. They've got a database of 450 repeat customers, and 50% of those people come back year in, year out, and they spend on average £900. So that gives the business sales of £598,500. Okay? Okay, so far, and everybody with me? They've got a gross margin of 45%, which gives them a gross profit of £269,325. And they've got overheads of £251,370, which gives them £17,955 in bottom line profit. This £17,950 is a percentage of that sales figure there, and it actually is 3%. So that means that 97% of every sale, 97p in every pound, is eaten up by costs. For me, that's not a great return on effort. Now, before I move on, show what you can do this. First thing, don't get hung up with the numbers. Your numbers are going to be totally different to these. Yours could be hugely different to these. The thing is, the model works, whatever the numbers are. The other thing not to get carried away with is this figure, the average sale. A lot of people say to me, oh, I can't work that out. There's too big a gap. I know I've got customers who are spending £10, I've got customers who are spending £1,000. The gap's just too big. It doesn't matter. What's the average between those two figures? Because when you apply strategies to the averages rise. What is it they say? When a tide rises, all boats rise. Now, here's another clever guy, Warren Buffett, and he says that you don't need to do extraordinary things in business to get extraordinary results. So think about that principle. What if we were to do something that's not so extraordinary to those 8 areas in blue, go to work on them, put in place 1, 2 or 3 strategies over the course of a year, strategies that are designed to raise those numbers by just 5%. So ask yourself, in your business, would it be out of the realms of possibility for you to raise those 8 areas in blue by just 5% over the course of 12 months? And I think most of you would be agreeing and saying, well, of course it wouldn't. So some of you may have opportunities to massively grow those numbers. You can probably, in actual fact, you can probably do a 5% increase just by starting to focus on them. So now let me show you how you can really ramp up the sales and profit in your business by looking at what happens to the outputs, the red boxes, the things that you can't control, when you improve the numbers that you can control in the blue boxes by as little as 5%. So in this business now, leads are up to 1,155. That's just 5 more leads per month. And there's over 60 strategies that you can use that can affect that number. Conversion rate is now 31.5%. Let me just point out, by the way, I'm not saying it's 30% to 35%. You're multiplying 30% by 5%. So it's a small increase to 31.5%. The average sale is now £1,260. They've got 473 people returning with a conversion rate of 52.5%. And the average spend is £945. The gross margin is now 47.3%. And the overheads, what I've done in the overheads here is I'm actually, in this example, I have increased the overheads by 5%. But let me point out, it's a business myth, absolute myth, that as your sales go up, your overheads have to go up. It's not true. And so many people fall into that trap, including yours truly, by the way. But nowadays, actually, with my clients, I use a tool called the Profit Maximizer. And what we do is we ask 2 simple questions against every single expense in the business. And when we do that exercise, I absolutely guarantee that every client gets a reduction in their overheads. But for this example here, I'm actually going to increase them. But actually, before I move on, if anybody would like the Profit Maximizer chart that shows you the effects you can have on your overheads by reducing them by certain percentages, just put Maximizer in the chat and I'll get it over to you after the workshop. So let's now look what happens to the areas in red after we've increased the areas in blue by as little as 5%. Sales are now £693,087. That's nearly a 16% increase. Gross profit is now £327,366. That's nearly a 22% increase. The bottom line profit is now £63,995. That's a 256% increase. Something I want you to be aware of here is the rate at which the profit percentage is growing at a much greater rate than the sales percentage growth. And that's where you want to get to in business. The point where your profit percentage is growing at a greater rate than your sales percentage. If you think back to the beginning of the workshop, I told you about my first restaurant, and I mentioned that after 12 months, we'd increased the turnover by 400%, which is great. It's absolutely brilliant, but the bottom line profit increased by nearly 900%. And that happened because following these principles. What I would say is that in far too many businesses, you actually see this in reverse, where you got the sales are growing at a faster rate than the profit percentage. And when you do that, when those sales grow faster than your profit, the gap between those two widens, you end up in a huge cash flow problem. And I know that because I've made that very painful mistake. Now, when I show these numbers, there's usually 2 reactions to them. I can absolutely guarantee the numbers are correct. In actual fact, I did ask you to follow along on a calculator. And if you did, you might have slight differences to my numbers because you may have rounded numbers up. That little 0.2 that you round down to a 0 to make it a whole figure. Those little 0.2s, those little fractions or those little decimal points, they compound as well. So the compounding thing really works, and that's why you might have a slight difference to my numbers. The challenge I find is that as business owners, we get sort of caught up in this narrative of 10x and everything. So we end up working harder, a lot harder, when you can actually build an incredible business by having a slightly different perspective. Now, the other reaction I often get is one of excitement. But let me tell you, we haven't got going yet. This thing gets even better. So imagine if each year we were to put together a plan to improve those 8 areas in blue, and let's just stick with an 8% increase in each of those areas. So we're going to come back every year and do it for 3 years. What do you think the outcome's going to be down here on this bottom line profit after 3 years of going through this process? Anybody like to guess what that bottom number there is going to be? Oh, someone's mhm, mhm. There's some guesses coming through. Um, okay, no one's actually guessed it right yet. No one's actually come close, actually. So let's reveal the answer. After 3 years, the sales are going to be £929,339. That's a 55% increase. Gross profit is now £484,100. That's an 80% increase. And the bottom line profit is now £193,107. That's a 975% increase. Once again, look at the gap between how the gap is growing between the rate of profit increase to the rate of sales. That's the direction you want your business to go in. So the key thing here is knowing which strategies to plug into the blue boxes. And all you need is one, maybe two, three strategies per year, but just look at the difference that it can make to the business. Now, I would say a really great question to ask yourself at this point is which of these areas is going to have the biggest opportunity for you in your business? Because some areas are going to have bigger opportunities than others. You're going to be able to get much bigger increases in some of these blue boxes in your business. Another great question to ask would be, where do you start? Well, it really does depend on the stage of your business, and it really does depend on the challenges that business is facing. But for me, the place to always start is in margins, because there's no point in working really, really hard if there's little or no profit dropping at the bottom line. And actually, when you know how to adjust these numbers, you know how to increase the profit margins, there's some huge, huge wins to be had when you understand how to do that. And another great thing is that when you increase that, you end up working less for more. That makes sense. Overheads is another great place to look. Something I ask all my clients to do is reduce their overheads by 10% every year. When we're budgeting for the next year, reduce overheads by 10%. I don't remember anybody not achieving that. Next, I would look at some of that low-hanging fruit. And one area that's always low-hanging fruit in a business is the conversion rate. Now, most people don't measure these numbers, but when they do actually measure their conversion rate, a lot of people are shocked by how low it is. So let's just say, well, that's great, actually. A low number is great because you can do lots of things with that number. You can really, really increase it. But let's just say you've got 10 people or 10 inquiries coming to the business, and 2 of those inquiries buy. That means you've got a conversion rate of 20%, which is pretty much bog standard in most businesses. What happens if you were to increase your sales skills or improve your sales skills, improve your sales processes, and you got that number up to 4 out of 10? What have you just done? You've just doubled the sales in your business by focusing in on that one area. Not a massive increase, but a massive output. Another area that produces great results and getting really good at. I spoke about the delivery step in the confidence system earlier on, which means you're working on the systems and the processes, which gives you a huge impact or makes a huge impact on your gross margin percentage. And so, what part, by the way, is when you work on any area of this model, it has a ripple effect on all of the other areas. Now, when you improve your systems, that means your customer experience improves and they're more likely to come back. And they're more likely to come back bringing their friends and family with them because they tell people about that experience. Something to consider, by the way, is which of these is the most profitable? Which customer is the most profitable? A new customer or a returning customer? Which one produces the most profit? I would suggest it's these people because you've got a market for these. You've got to spend time and money getting these people to raise their hand and inquire. These people here, you just got to keep in touch with them. In terms of the average sale, I mean, the greatest upsell line in the history of the universe is, would you like fries with that? So the big question is what's the portion of fries in your business?